Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Buckeye Breakdown. Owen Smith here on a solo pod. You may also be getting a solo pod from Matt Warner at some point this week as well. It is kind of a dead week, of course, for the Buckeyes, as there is no game this upcoming week, but we do have things to talk about. The Buckeyes will be hosting a home playoff game in the shoe against Tennessee, 8 o'clock on Saturday, December 21st. So we are either going to be heading into Christmas extremely happy and looking forward to 2025, since that next matchup would be Oregon on New Year's Day. So we would be able to end 2024 on a high note, or we could be ruining things before Santa even has a chance to come down our chimneys. So we will talk about the playoff bracket more than anything next week. We will kind of start breaking down the game more, what we're expecting, predictions, all the good stuff there. So, again, thank you everybody for joining us. So, yeah, I mean, I think the thing where I'll start off, right? I'm not gonna repeat the whole bracket, bring up the graphic and all of that stuff. I think we all know by the time that you're watching and listening that where the Buckeyes stand. The Buckeyes will host that game. They are the 8th seed. That's not changing. And we are looking forward to that matchup. I think that where we'll just go straight to is that the Buckeyes by far have the toughest path. And Buckeyes, Volunteers, Oregon Ducks, those three teams got the toughest draw from this, right? Regardless of who wins the 8-9 matchup, Oregon is going to be hosting a tough opponent. I think they clearly would probably rather see the Volunteers, considering they went down to the wire and Buckeyes had the ball with a chance to win the game back on their own home field. Clearly, they've played football since then, so they have improved. But either way, I think this is the toughest little section because you have Penn State plays SMU, and then they would go on to play Boise. You have Texas, they play Clemson. They would go on to play Arizona State. Like those teams, the conference championship losers benefited more than anybody, right? Georgia is going to have to deal with more than likely a tough Notre Dame team who, in normal college football years, or if there weren't the auto bids or anything like that, would probably be a top 4 team, right? I think that they would be in the 4-team playoff for sure, regardless of that NIU loss, but. Either way, conference champions do not get to benefit from this playoff, and we'll focus more on the Buckeyes, right? Buckeyes will have to host a Tennessee team who's been resting just as much as they have in the shoe, would have to go to Oregon on the West Coast, which, again, there's some downtime. There's plenty of time to get out there, get accumulated to that. With it being over Christmas break or holiday break at Ohio State, they wouldn't have to stay back for classes, so they could go get adjusted to that time, practice out there, just be adjusted to California more rather than when they went out to Oregon, and I think went out on that Friday, just the day before. So not as many adjustments could have been made there from a timing perspective. But then, if they go and do that, take care of business and beat the Oregon Ducks, they would have to play Texas in the Cotton Bowl, which, by the way, the Cotton Bowl is in Dallas, Texas. So not only are they rewarded with a win, with back-to-back wins, or a win and go play on the West Coast, but then they'd be playing Dallas or Texas in their backyard. I mean, I know Texas is huge, but clearly there's a lot of Dallas residents that would consider themselves as Texas fans, I'm sure, over the others. And then if things are chalk, right, which we'll talk about the playoff, if things are chalk, they would have to then play in a national championship against Georgia in Atlanta. So, have we seen this before? Yes, we have. How did that turn out? So, not only do they have the toughest teams ahead of them if things are chalk, as far as their opponents are concerned, but they also will have something against them at every step of the way in addition to, right? Location does matter. Especially, I would say probably more, I would be more worried about the Dallas and the Atlanta pieces of that rather than not as worried about the Rose Bowl component, because it's not in Oregon, and there's familiarity with the Rose Bowl, with that location. They've played there before. They've seen a lot of success there before. So there, and again, there's a week and a half, almost 2 week adjustment into that from the time that they would play Tennessee until the time that they would play out at the Rose Bowl against Oregon. So very tough sledding ahead, but I am here to be the one to say this is the ideal situation for the Buckeyes. And the reason I say that is because I've seen this Buckeye team play Nebraska, and I've seen this Buckeye team play Michigan. And in both of those cases, they clearly were favored by quite a bit, and they clearly played down to their opponent to a point of almost losing both of them, but clearly losing the one that hurts more, and losing that game to Michigan. So, in my opinion, I think that this is good. I think that this is better than having to go play Boise State or Iowa, Arizona State, Boise State, or having to play IU in the first round. Like, I think that this works out a lot better for the Buckeyes. I will make that case because I do think that this is a team, and we've seen it twice this year already, that this is a team that will play down to their competition. They will let the other team sometimes dictate what goes on in that game, right? I mean, even look at Iowa and IU, right? Those were two tougher opponents, I would say. Clearly, IU, a tougher opponent being in the college football playoff. But in that first half, they let them kind of dictate some things, right? It was a close scoring game, and those are lesser than opponents. So there's multiple examples, whether it's only the first half of a game or if it's the entire game like Nebraska and Michigan, where they will play down to an opponent. So I don't want to see that against Boise State. I don't want to see that against Arizona State. Like, if this Buckeye team isn't going to win a national championship, I would rather the loss be, and this is loser behavior, loser talk here by me, but I would rather the loss be on tough sledding than, I mean, can you freaking imagine if we lost to Arizona State or Boise State? The program would be in ruins. Like, we already feel like it's in ruins now, but the Buckeye, this program would be in ruins if we had 2 losses, made it into the playoff, got that first playoff win, and then we went and lost to Arizona State or Boise State. Like, if we're going to lose, I guess let it be to Oregon. I guess let it be to Texas. I guess let it be to Georgia. That graphic is only going to get worse. I always bring up the graphic, that Ryan Day infamous graphic that's inevitably going to pop up every single time that he plays a top 5 matchup. I would rather those losses come at those stages if they're going to lose. I don't think they are, right? I am, We'll talk about the matchup against Tennessee more next week, but I think just state of the program, state of the team, I have faith that it is still the roster that we've had, right? Like, nothing has changed. We've lost Devin Brown now, which he'll be sticking around. We've lost like a couple of guys that to be expected, right? Jaden Ballard, Kojo Antwi, like some of those guys, not necessarily contributors to all sides of the field, right? But this is still that roster, right? This is still that team, for better or for worse, right? The team that can't overcome Michigan, they're still here, but also on the plus side, right? We are a controversial offensive pass interference away from being 11-1 and being in the Big Ten championship with that game in Oregon. We are a field goal or 2 away from being 11-1 and in the Big Ten championship and being in that 5 seed. Like, this is still that team, right? Again, for better or for worse. And I am going for better on this. I'm taking an optimistic standpoint. Now, that roster is still there, and that stands true. And I have belief in that because you do have Caleb Downs, you do have Jeremiah Smith, you do have Trevion Henderson and Quinshawn Judkins and Emeka Ibuka. You have all the guys, right? You have all these pieces. Now, that's a huge component of it. My biggest question, I think everybody's biggest question is Ryan Day going to change? Is Chip Kelly going to change? Is Jim Knowles, although he's been doing very well, is he going to stay on the current path that he's been, right? Because he's had some questionable games in his tenure as well. And I think that's going to be the biggest question. Again, I may regret this. I may look back at this on December 21st or January 1st or January, what would that be, 8th, January 10th. or January 20th, and I may be a fool, right, looking back at this statement here, but I do think that this team tends to be better with the back against the wall, right? This team tends to be, or it seems like the coaching staff reacts better, right? I know it's broken record, right, about the Georgia loss in 2022, broken record. But I mean that is what's possible, right? 2020 Clemson, right? That's Ryan Day against the wall. We haven't seen in the Michigan game. I think that's a separate thing. I don't. Hopefully that is figured out. Good Lord, I hope so. But that's where my faith lies. Is I think you have the roster, and I think that we've seen this story before. We've seen similarities of the story before, where it's like, what's there to lose, guys? You have the toughest path ahead of you. Good. I'm glad that we have that, because now you can go lose these. I feel like it almost loosens the team up a little bit, in my opinion, right? Like there is so much more to lose when you go to Boise State. There's so much more to lose when you go to Arizona State. It sucks, but yeah, I think that you can play it maybe a little looser, because each of these potential opponents, again, if things are chalk on the other side of it, right? Clearly the 8 seed going all the way to the Natty is not chalk. But on the flip side of it, if it is chalk, right, Tennessee is a get-right game, okay? So there's the component of let's get right. We're in the playoff. Let's start the second season now for 2024 and 2025. Oregon, right? Let's get back. We were that one or two plays away. We didn't play our A game on all sides. Let's go show them what our A game looks like. Let's, instill some further confidence. Texas, right? You have things against you. You have Dallas against you, but there's kind of, not direct similarities, right? But there is kind of this chase for who's the next Saban or who's the next closest thing to it. And I think in some ways Sark and Day have some similarities. They're both offensive geniuses. They both are still unproven in the national title. But then you have like that little component, not that it matters as much, but that quarterback across the field, he was your guy and he went against you. And of course, I think now hindsight is 2020. I don't think that the Buckeyes would have changed anything, because everyone wants to think that, hey, I have what it takes to make that guy the guy. But I don't think the Buckeyes would take Ewers now necessarily, but there is that component of he left us, right? And that's the guy that we're facing. He is in, it would be so challenging to deal with and deal with the challenge of going, hey, this guy left our program and he is the one standing in front of us in a national title game, or ahead of us before a national title game. He is in our way to that path. So there's a little bit of that component. And then again, if things are chalk, it's Georgia. It's that same stadium that caused so much pain, but was so great for most of that game. It's that same stadium. It's that same coach. It's again, there's that chase for who's the next Saban, who's going to be the king, and right now it is Kirby. And so there's that component. So I think all of that is fuel to the fire, right? I strongly believe in that. And again, I may be a fool on these 3 different dates or 4 different dates. I may be a fool and look back at this and hate myself, but I do sit here and I do believe that the toughest path is good for the Buckeyes. I believe in the roster. I believe in the team. There are things that need to change. We cannot go out there with a game plan like we had against Michigan. We cannot go out there with a performance like we had against Nebraska. We cannot go out there and make some of those mistakes that were made in the Oregon game. We have to go and play our A game. That's what the playoffs are for. And I think this is what we've been waiting for, right, with Ryan Day, with the NFL ties. Again, he has more experience now in college football than he ever had in the NFL, but, the way that he's always looked at it seems very much like the NFL, right? Just stack those wins and, get right for this. And I believe in him. And I think that this is like again, very much different tone from what I had a week ago when we talked about the loss, right? I think this is this can correct so much for the Buckeyes. This can correct so much for Ryan Day. Like, you are still going to have the monkey on your back from November, right? That's still going to be the case. Like, and until next November and until that next win or couple wins, like, you're still going to have that streak hanging over you. But you know what erases some of that for some Buckeye fans? I know that it's probably a 50-50 split. But I think, for no offense, if you're listening to this and you're this far into the episode with me, I think you probably sit on this side. But there is another side where I don't know how a national championship can't erase some of that, right? I think there's an unreasonable side of the fan base that even if he wins the national championship, he needs to go. Or you know, that I'm still not happy with him. It's like, dude, if he wins a natty, like, you're going to be pretty happy. Most people are. The only way to erase some of that pain is to go win on this path, right? Or at least die trying in the national championship, right? Like, it's gonna suck if that happens to be a loss, but as long as you're dying trying in that national championship and it's not a piss poor effort like we've seen, you know, you have that's the only way to erase some of this. So, okay. So I've talked about it. Toughest road is the best for the Buckeyes. That is my case. I will rest on that. And again, that does. I am purely looking at this as like toughest path is good because of some of the competition I'm playing down to it. But I also think it's just good for the fan base, right? Because I think, again, my final point, and I won't repeat myself again on this, but can you imagine if you lost to a lesser opponent? If you lost to IU in the first round after you already played them, if you lost to Boise or whoever, can you imagine SMU? Like, good Lord, if you're going to go down, at least go down to one of these four teams. So, okay, so that's enough talk of like toughest road. Now let's talk reality, or at least prediction of reality. So I don't think things are going to go chalk. I don't think that is the 100% path. I think it's about 80% of the path, right? I do think you clearly have to play Tennessee. You clearly have to play Oregon if you win that game. Now, do you have to play Texas? Most likely, right? So you have Texas and Clemson. Clemson is, they're lucky. They're lucky that they won. And if you're looking at the 12 best teams, or if you're looking at any of that stuff, statistics where you don't have an auto bid from the ACC, Clemson's not in it. And also, if Syracuse doesn't beat Miami, Clemson's not in it. So I think Texas does handle them. I do think that Texas handles Arizona State. I do believe in that. I think Texas and Ewers are good enough to handle that path. So from there, you would then have... So again, I have Ohio State clearly beating Tennessee. That's my prediction. And then I do have Ohio State beating Oregon. Okay, we'll get into it. We'll see how the Buckeyes look. As it stands today, I do have supreme confidence that they will get right with Tennessee, and I do think that they will have the time and energy to make adjustments to get out to the West Coast and to correct a wrong that happened earlier in the season. Okay, so then that sets up Texas and Ohio State in these semifinals. I think that's the case. I 100% think that that Texas will be there. And that is going to be in Dallas, right? That matchup I'll hold for now. Clearly, I have Buckeyes going and winning that, but I'll hold that for now. So let's go to the other side. So SMU, Penn State by a mile. Penn State wins that. So Penn State, Boise State. Listen, the Ashton Jeanty story is awesome. I think that he should win the Heisman, considering that Colorado is not in the playoff and his performance in conference championship weekend. I think Travis Hunter is clearly the better prospect, athlete, whatever, and what he does is amazing. But as far as the Heisman's concerned, I do think you got to be a playoff team or pretty damn close to a playoff team, and Boise State is that. Anyways, that's a side tangent. So I do think Penn State handles Boise State. All right, so then that puts Penn State in the semifinal. Now, this is where I will change a couple things, right? Indiana, Notre Dame, I think Notre Dame wins that. I think it'll be close enough. Like, I think IU will gain some respect in that game. Again, this is like the, This is kind of a proven opportunity for IU. There's been so much talk against them. They didn't beat the Buckeyes. So either way, I do think that they have some things to prove to just belong for a future standpoint. And by the way, Cignetti does have to earn that contract a little bit, right? Like you gotta at least, again, die trying in that game. So then that sets up Notre Dame and Georgia. This is where I don't go chalk. This is where I don't think you have that 100% path, because I do think that Notre Dame beats Georgia. So I do think it is a Notre Dame Penn State semifinal with Ohio State and Texas on the opposite side. Now, I'm a little flip-flop. I'm not going to make 100% certain decision or call on this just yet. Currently, I am leaning in Notre Dame beating Penn State in that game, but I do think it can go either way, and I do think we need to see what the first couple rounds look like before I make a 100% decision on who wins that game. But if I'm filling out a bracket like March Madness, as it stands today, I do have Notre Dame winning that game. So that then sets up Ohio State Notre Dame national championship. Scary. I live in Indiana. I have a lot of Notre Dame fans. I've been to Notre Dame game. My family grew up. My Notre Dame was forced on me at a young age. I am not a Buckeye by nurture, right? Or by nature. Is it nature? Yeah, I'm not a Buckeye by nature or nurture. I guess I kind of branched off on my own and started my own tradition. So a lot of Notre Dame. For me, this is nightmare scenario. I'd rather play Georgia and lose to Georgia than play Notre Dame and lose to Notre Dame. But I'd rather beat Notre Dame again, like make that 3-0 of the past 3 years. But either way, so that's where I'm saying it's not 100%. This is the path, but I do think Notre Dame is just as much of a challenge, or Penn State is just as much of a challenge. Like, I think that if James Franklin, for the loss that they've already been handed by the Buckeyes, for all the things, like I think if you give James Franklin another chance in the same season, and he's already built some confidence by winning 3 playoff games at that point, that does concern me. But either way, I do have the Buckeyes in the national championship, and of course, Homer alert, I do have them winning. Again, confidence on the roster, confidence in the coaching, to get right and to play up to their opponents. But either way, that is how I look at it now. Now, there's plenty of things that could change. I'll say this. What's currently, to me, stands in front of the Buckeyes from winning a national championship is down to a very few things, but they're big things, right? I think I'll start with the offensive line, because there's 2 things that are like outside of coach. Actually, there's 3 things, okay? 2 things are neck and neck as far as the players are concerned. So I'll start with the players concerned first. Neck and neck, it's O-line and Will Howard. I'll start with the O-line because, Will Howard, some of his does rely on how much he is protected and how much time he's given to throw the ball and make decisions and all of that. O-line concerns me because it is probably 95% chance that we roll out some new version of the offensive line for the 4th time now, right? Because Oregon, we had to adjust mid-game. Nebraska, you had to adjust late in the game, and then you had to adjust after. What was that? Was that going into IU? So this would be the 4th version of the offensive line this year, and even then, like Tegra and Sareveld were kind of back and forth early in the season. But I do think Tegra is going to be benched, so you have a couple of tough decisions to make, right? Because guard is where some of the challenges have shown up, right? Those interior runs and all of that. I think you absolutely need to keep Donovan Jackson at left tackle. I think the argument that you make is that you go Hinsman back to left guard, and then you go Sareveld to right guard because he's repped at it. He's played in the game. He did a better job than Tegra did in the Michigan game on the left side. So I do think you have to move him to right guard. And then, of course, you keep Fryer at right tackle. That's not going to change. And then there's a lot of talk of Josh Padilla and Luke Montgomery. I'm not as in tune with those two. I know Luke Montgomery, both of them had a lot of hype There's a lot of hype that Josh Padilla is the center of the future for this team. So has he built enough equity in the program to be your starting center for a playoff run? That is the question. That is the ultimate question. So we will see. I think the other thing that you could do is you have seen Luke Montgomery a little bit at left guard when Donovan Jackson came out of when Donovan Jackson was kicked to left tackle when Zen Mihalski got hurt. So you could keep Hinsman at center. You could just move Saravel to the right side, and then you could put Luke Montgomery at the left side, since he's kind of clearly repped at that a couple times at least. So, but that's concern number one. I think you have to figure that out. That has to, and it probably is based on Ryan Day's press conference, that has to be the focus for this Buckeye team the next week at least, right? And then game week, right? So that's concern number one. That's what could hold us back. We know that we've lost our two best offensive linemen. Like, dude, when you do that, I don't care what depth is behind it. Like, when you do that, that's always going to be tough sledding, right? But it's extra tough when you can't recruit and you can't find guys to be brought in to challenge them, or at least they're too young at this point too. And you miss out on David Sanders and all that too. So it doesn't help for future's sake. The portal will help for next year, but it isn't going to help right now. So O-line is concern number one, but I do think Will Howard is concern 1B because he can bounce back, and I think he has bounce back ability for the most part. I think he was concussed last game. That doesn't excuse everything, but like there clearly was something up. But he played, right? He was at least good enough, even if he wasn't 100%, right? He wasn't bad enough to where Devin Brown was going to play or Julian Sam was going to play. So same thing would happen in the playoffs, right? So even if he was concussed or not, that's on the doctors and the coaches to figure out, hey, is our threshold too lax? I don't know. But either way, but even before that game, he has made some backbreaking mistakes, and he has the ability to recover, and I fully believe that he will recover when 100% healthy, at least in the head region. But like, what version of Will Howard are you getting? Because I think the O-line is the bigger concern because that affects both sides of it. But like, I do think that Will Howard can overcome that, and maybe I'm convincing myself. Maybe I'm convincing myself that 1A is Will Howard now. Maybe I don't know. Either way, okay. So I do think he stands. All right, I've already changed my mind. That's how quickly I am. I think O-line does dictate some of that, but Will Howard can overcome that, and that is part of the decision making and all of that. So Will Howard's 1A. All right, I already talked myself out of it. So Will Howard, can you make the right decisions? Can you make the deep throws? I think you can, but can you make the deep throws? Okay, so those are the big concerns there. I believe in Will Howard, but he is either going to have a statue outside of Ohio Stadium or needs to get out of Ohio as quick as possible because we know how crazy Buckeye fans are. Let's not be too crazy. These are human beings and college students, regardless of how much money they make in NIL. And but more importantly, they are human beings. Okay. What else can get in front of them? Well, I think it's very obvious. The corners is Igbignosin going to be able to keep his hands to himself? No, but is it going to be backbreaking? TBD. That's part of it. And then listen, Denzel Burke, you were the guy. You were the one that put this natty or bust out there from the player perspective. Back it up, right? You've had some rough games. You've had some, rough, just rough performances, but you are a 5-year starter, 4-year starter, 5-year. I don't know how it works. Is it 5 years? Because did he get the COVID year? Yeah. Either way, you've had at least 4 years of starting experience. Like, prove why you're back. Prove why you said natty or bust, and go. This is natty or bust now, right? This is you either go win the Natty or you don't. So yeah, I think those 1A, 1B, Will Howard, offensive line, and then I think 2 would be cornerbacks. And then coaching, of course, is all of that, right? If Will Howard's not the guy, if he's not making the right decisions, you can't bench. I don't know. Can you bench him? Can you put in Sayin? Can you pull a Jalen Hurts situation? Let's hope that it doesn't get to that, right? But what coaching decisions? How much do you put it on him versus yourselves when it comes to play calling and decision making there? So, and then just like the ability to, the coaching clearly impacts like what decisions you make on the offensive line, right? What do you roll out there? How do you adjust quick or not if need be? And then on the cornerback side, right? Defensive backs, do you rotate in Jermaine Matthews more? Do you start Jermaine Matthews more? Listen, guys, this is do or die. So I think you got to just let feelings out the window, let NIL dollars out the window, like let it all out of the building and just go, what gives us the best chance for this game? And then for the rest, right? For Tennessee, what gives us the best chance? That's game number 1. You either play game number 2 or you don't based on game number 1. So I think you have to let it all out. I don't care. Easier for me to say I'm not the one managing a $20 million roster and all that stuff. But like, listen, man, what gives us the best shot? I don't care about people's feelings. We are at this point in the season. If you want to win a national championship, play national championship level football. So, all right, a lot of ranting, a lot of rambling. We will be back next week. Like I said, Matt may do a podcast some point this week. If he does not, we will see you next Monday or Tuesday doing the game breakdown, preview, projections, all of that stuff. Get Matt's thoughts on the playoff bracket. And we will be here on Twitter as well, or X, Buckeye BDN on X. And then you have 317 Buckeye and FTS Warner, I think, on Twitter as well for Matt. So thank you all for listening. Thank you for watching, and we will see you guys next time.